worried about this software.
Well, you know, I don't know if there was something about the share screen live when we were in Vienna.
You did such a wonderful job.
I did. Oh, you're too funny. Okay, I'm gonna try and share. Oh, it's not letting me share my PowerPoint. How rude is that?
Just imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just gonna go through the agenda. And the reason why I didn't want to do it from the meeting materials is because I made an edit. Okay, can I share? Presentation view. Okay, I will just share it this way. And we will adapt. Hey, Aaron. Hey, Danny.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, I'm going to boot you guys off the video until we're ready. All right. Aaron, I presume you are on and you can hear us. Aaron? Co-chair? Can you test your audio?
It says his mic's not
your
working.
mic is not working. Okay. I'm going to give him 1 minute. While we're waiting, can I get a note taker, please? You can take notes through the, on the Meet Echo, that little pencil thing is the note-taking tool. Pretty please, I can't really get started unless I have one note taker. Matt's not on, Paul's not on, so I can't pick on them either. Thanks, Danny.
Oh, Danny is okay.
Yeah. Phil, Danny's going to be speaking for a chunk as well. Can you also help take notes?
Okay.
That would be awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Wow, it's not very good on mobile.
Oh. Okay. Well, I will try and run as much as I can, so as not to tax you. I'm just glad you were able to join and make it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is an actual virtual interim for the System for Cross-Domain Identity Management. And I know I need to change the name. I don't know if I need to change it on the IETF site too. To the somebody will have to remind me the Simple Cloud Identity Management, I think is what it's for. But anyway, welcome to this.
Nancy, it's it's actually correct. The original name was Simple Cloud Identity Management, but
Okay.
IETF
See?
board hated Simple and Cloud.
If I recall, that was true. Yes. Okay, so we are good to go. So since this is a virtual interim, the note well, IETF policies apply. I think everybody in the call has been participating in the IETF and should be aware of our policies and code of conduct. So with that, I'm going to jump in straight through. I'm going to thank Danny and Phil. Since we're running Meet Echo, I think the Jabber just goes through the chat. So I will try and monitor that as well. Aaron, I don't know if you can through your mobile, but folks, just there's only a few of us on the call. Just call me out if somebody has put a comment or question there that needs to be called out. Okay.
Yeah, I can see the chat too.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So with that in mind, I had updated the agenda, but I didn't have enough time to upload it. So I have not heard back from Pam, and I don't see her on the call. So this may be a short call unless somebody can speak to the progress. Danny, I don't know if you've been working with Pam on the use cases as well.
No, it's been radio silence for the most part. I've chatted with her little bits and pieces, and I know she's made progress, but I can't really articulate what progress it is. She's been on a travel thing with a couple of conferences the past couple of weeks, though.
Yeah. Oh, she might be at. Okay. Yeah, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
She's at the same event I'm at.
Ah, okay. That would explain it. Okay, so as you can see, Agenda Bash. Since Pam is not on the call, we are not going to be able to get an update on the use cases. Janelle sent her apologies for not being able to make it at the last moment. But Danny, she mentioned that you could provide the update. And so that will leave us plenty of time. So we'll kick off with Danny providing the updates. And then what I added to the agenda is Phil has provided 2 drafts in our, I call it reflector. One of them is draft hunt skim. I forget MV, multi-value filtering as one draft. The second one is basically a profile for how the Skim as a schema could be shared through the shared signals and events framework. And so, Phil, we are going to have plenty of time, I think, to discuss the drafts, sorry. And we can have the discussion on whether the group is ready for adoption before I actually can do the call for adoption. So my apologies, I can't share the updated one, but I just called out those updates. Any other changes to the agenda? Any other topics that you want me to add to discuss in the agenda? Going once, going twice. Phil, I think you had your mic up first and then Danny. Did you have a comment, Phil?
Yeah, oh, did I? No, I don't.
Okay.
I just left the mic on, but I can turn it off.
I can turn you off. There you go. Okay, so Danny, you want to get us started? I can stop sharing if there's anything that you want to share.
I don't know that I have anything to share. It's, I guess, just mostly words. So yeah, I tried to I guess I just want to provide an update where we're at with the schema and the protocol work. So for anybody who's not aware, it's I think both Janelle's and my first time like really doing much of anything in the standards world, and we've gotten hit a little bit by that problem of like, how do you eat an elephant? And like, it's the like, yeah, you have to figure out where to take the first bite, right? So I think made a little progress and on like how we're approaching things at least. And I sent out an email this morning to the mailing list, just sort of saying like what things we at least have some idea of like what direction we think they should go, what things probably need further discussion. I would be overjoyed if anybody has any strong opinions, feelings, anything, any passion for any of the items on the agenda. If anybody wants to join in authoring any drafts, otherwise this might be a bit of a long and lonely process for Janelle and I. But yeah, I think the sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
If I can find my mute button, I will definitely. There's a mute button in the lower right hand corner, and I don't know if it worked. So sorry about that. So I know when I wrote my original Skim client as part of the Skim 1.0 spec work, I was pretty interested in the schema, making sure that the schema really did describe programmatically what the client should do in terms of the attributes that it was receiving back in the responses. So I will certainly take a look at what you guys have now, and provide any feedback that I have about sort of where it is in terms of completeness. And I know that originally I had found a couple inconsistencies in the schema, so I'll go find my notes from that and make sure that those get cleaned up as part of this process as well. So I'll raise my hand and definitely jump in and take a look at where you guys are at and see if I can help move it forward.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you. So in case anybody has not had a chance to see the email that I sent out to the mailing list earlier today, one of the things I shared in it is that Janelle and I, since the last the major IETF meeting, I don't, is plenary always the right word? We have converted the Skim spec into Markdown, or Cramdown, and uploaded that into the GitHub. As sort of like newer editors who aren't particularly I guess comfortable working in XML, it seemed like an easier way both for for any work that Janelle and I would do, as well as just sort of increasing the accessibility of anybody who wants to jump in and propose edits or changes or whatnot. So yeah, the existing schema and protocol docs for 76, 43, and 44 are now in Markdown and are in the GitHub. There's still some formatting things that need to get taken care of. I've learned a lot about Markdown during this process, but not all of it. So if anybody sees any things that that don't look right, please share your skills. Beyond that, yeah, I provided that list of the sort of the major pieces of work that we have some form of idea on, and I think for the ones that don't already have drafts that cover them from Phil, that we'll try and have some sort of at least basic framework draft out, even just enough to get the ball rolling. I think for a lot of things there are multiple valid approaches to how to solve a problem, and whether we stick to specific one specific one or multiple to allow for sort of different scenarios for implementation. I think that's something that we can discuss once we have that structure in place.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't have any. Sure,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I don't really have any other sort of like major earth-shattering developments, any super exciting news to share other than I think we've gotten a lot of the sort of that initial like bootstrapping or whatever you'd like to call it of how do we start approaching these figured out now. And hopefully we'll be able to then capitalize on that to have more progress in the upcoming weeks and months.
Okay. The question that I was going to ask, I've not had a chance to look at the GitHub repo, but basically you're starting with the current RFCs as the base and updating, because that was one of the discussions we had earlier on, I think, as we had just chartered, whether we would create brand new drafts or just edit and enhance the current documents.
Yeah. So in the interest of sort of we'll say making progress and actually solving problems, the way that I figured we could approach things is to start for any of the new major features by writing them as standalone drafts, and then at some point we then figure out, do we publish these solely as extensions to 2.0? Do we start merging them into the base, like the core of a new document somewhere, and make one comprehensive thing? But to me and to Janelle, and I've spoken with Paul, who's also not here today, Paul Lanzi. To all of us, at least, it's still a bit unclear on the 2.0 versus 2.1 versus 3.0 thing. And I've also, one of my colleagues at Microsoft, Mark Wall, his take on it as well is that 2.0 was written as an extensible like standard, and that if we were to go towards just sort of immediately say, okay, we're doing 3.0, that it would potentially harm adoption, because if there's news that 3.0 is coming in with 2 years or whatever, it doesn't really drive people to want to adopt in that 2-year period if they're just going to have to redo a lot of engineering work. So it's more of let's try to not make breaking changes and let's just extend wherever possible, is one of the approaches that I've tried to factor in here.
Okay.
This has by far been probably the most single like confusing and like time wasting thing for me and Janelle, of trying to wrap our head around like how to approach it. And we've gotten so caught up on the whole like version thing that we honestly, our preference at this point is to just sort of put it to the side. And
yeah, and that I would say, in the interest of making progress, let's not belabor the point of how to do the revision, but worry about the new work that we want to take on. The only reason why I was asking is that if you're going to add or extend to the current 2.0 from a document specification, it's fine if you start a new one and say, everything that's in the current RFC applies on top of, and here are the changes. But it sounds like you're taking the other approach, which is fine. From what I'm hearing you say on what the extensions are, but I'm just giving you suggestions as a chair, but we can take the feedback from the rest of the participants in the group as well.
And I can see sort of pros and cons from both sides, and like I'm also so incredibly inexperienced here. Like I this needs to be a larger, more well discussed thing, and I think the value where Janelle and I can add here is probably in sort of it's some amount of authoring, but also just in the we'll call it the cat herding around organizing things to get actual some drafts, some solutions at least proposed to some of these problems, and how we ultimately structure those. It can be a bigger discussion later. Because there's nothing saying we can't start with a draft and then decide to just sort of trash can the draft and put it into the body of a new main element of the spec. But yeah, on the topic of schema and protocol, that's I think all I've got to share. So given that we aren't going to have anything on use cases, I'll hand it back to you, Nancy, and I suspect you'll then go to Phil.
Yeah, sorry, I was getting sidetracked. I wanted to confirm. I'm pretty sure we've not had to fill in blue sheets anymore because I believe Meet Echo does it. So I think we're good. This is just an answer to somebody who had put it on the chat. Okay, so thanks for that update, Danny. If you can please post, I think you did, but if you can echo the GitHub link to where the documents are, just so that people can just click on it for ease, which I think you might have. No, I think you put the links to Cram Down, but to the actual repo that you've started.
I believe it's in. I'll check it. If not, I'll definitely make sure it's included. I also just added this chat here and into the notes. Which,
oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So moving on. Phil, I know we're catching. Oh, sorry, Jeremy, you're on the queue, or did we never take you off the queue? Okay,
no,
thanks.
I wasn't on the queue. My mic was left on from a previous chat. I haven't raised my hand.
Okay. Oh no, I was reaching out to you, Phil, but then I saw Jeremy on the queue. But I don't think he had anything since he dropped off the queue. But Phil, I think
I'm just waiting for this little misunderstanding to clear itself up. I was going to ask if in the GitHub repo we also put a link back to what the official IETF repo is. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. So the original documents are already RFC'd. Danny, I'm in the repo right now, and I see Skim use cases. There's nothing there.
Core schema and API are the ones that I've added markdown versions of.
Sorry, which ones?
The draft IETF Skim API
got
and
it.
Skim core schema.
Okay.
So with those two, I think almost no matter what we do, even if we end up going towards a new version of Skim, we may very well start at least with that, the 2.0 doc and start writing from there, even if it ends up looking nothing the same. But for use cases, my understanding from conversations I've had with Pam is it's almost, I think, a complete rewrite, like starting from scratch.
I would think the use cases, indeed, that would be the case. So I just put on the chat the links to the 2 GitHubs for those who are interested.
So is this the official document working area for the work in progress for the working group then?
Yeah, and actually, because they're not adopted yet, I need to go back to my notes. Aaron, I forget, we have a naming convention that we wanted to put.
Yeah.
So the intent. Go ahead, Aaron.
It's so the GitHub, think of that as just like the working area to do whatever you want. It's basically a free-for-all. It's fine to do anything in there, and it is only semi-official because it's within the IETF GitHub sort of realm. But none of that really is part of the official process until they're published as drafts in the data tracker. So that's when it's more important to get the naming convention and stuff right of the docs. But generally they will be, because they're not adopted yet, they are they're individual or independent drafts where they would have the author's name in instead of IETF. So I see the like it's IETF-SCIM core schema, so that would actually be draft dash whoever's the primary author dash Skim core schema until we officially adopt them as into the group.
So Danny, one of us, this is to say, one of us needs to go back and change the name of those repos because we have not adopted them yet. So it should be draft dash IETF dash, Alan Zollner, whichever one.
I can do that
if you want.
right now.
Yeah.
Since I have admin on the GitHub.
If you can, that'd be
great. Yeah, that would be good. Also, I've for what it's worth, even just for me to get those uploaded, there were some permissions problems. So I don't know that the GitHub instance as it is right now is
that really is on purpose.
Accessible to everybody. Oh, okay.
It is on purpose. So Janelle, because she was kind enough to help, so I can chat with her too. So the admin privileges should only be to the chairs and Janelle, and this goes to Aaron's point, right?
There is a editor's role in the org, which I see, which has already been created, and I do see Pam and Janelle and Zollner MSFT.
That would be me. Yeah.
You are all in the editor's role, so it's possible that. No, I see those repos are there too. So you should be able to push to them. Are you not able to?
No, so I can. What I was saying is for others to participate. Right now, I don't think that they would be able to. So it may be as simple as in whatever the main repo is, in part of a README or whatever, to provide instructions on how to gain access. If it's not intended for anybody to be able to publish anything.
I mean, no, the repos are public, and so as public, anybody is able to pull from it and create issues. And that was by intent and by design. The intent is not for them to give everybody open access to actually modifying any of the content, right? Except for the editors.
Okay, yeah,
that's how I would expect people to work, is to fork it, create a pull request if they want to actually submit text directly, or just talk in the issues section is totally fine too.
So, so we are going to need to rename the Skim API and the core schema. The question is, I don't know if that'll break the make files.
I don't see any in the repo, so it's just whatever you've named on your computer.
No make files in the repo.
It's fine. Yep.
Okay.
Who is the primary author of Skim API? Let's start there.
I think it would be me for both.
That's Danny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I will go ahead and do that right now.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. So once they're renamed, Danny, if you can actually put the links, not just to the whole Skim working group, but to the actual links of the documents, as Aaron is posting them right now. If you can post them to the IETF mail list, will be good. And that way we can get, everybody who's paying attention on the mail list to provide feedback as well.
And then I have a question about the documents in here. On the Skim API one, I assume the ones that are starting with RFC numbers, is that like, that's just a converted snapshot of the existing RFC? Is that the idea?
I would have to go look. It's been a few weeks. I don't remember how I named them.
Okay, because I can't tell which one is the one that has the, like, is the intended new version. Can you name?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking now, and the ones that start with RFC are the 3 different formats of the converted one. The other ones are just like direct XML pools of what's on the data tracker right now.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Huh.
So
Okay.
let's rename those also.
Yes.
To the name of the repo now.
Yep, I will do so.
Okay, great.
Okay. So, Danny, if you have questions about the whole IETF convention process for authoring, feel free to ping Aaron or I, or both of us, because we do have some experience and can help you navigate through that as well.
Yep, will do.
Alrighty. Thanks, Aaron, for helping.
Of course.
Okay, so I think we're on to the next piece of the agenda, the added revised agenda. So Phil, we started the conversation on the mail list. You asked interest in adopting the 2 drafts, the multivariate filtering and the Skim profile. Sorry, Skim events. I think it's Skim events. So typically what we do is the author asks for feedback. We have some discussion, if you recall from previous times, before we, the chairs, can do a call for adoption, right? I did look at the mail list. We did some early discussions of the multivariate filtering back when we were trying to create the working group. But I didn't see anything since.
No, there's not been any for the multi-value filtering. There hasn't been any really substantial discussion about the draft itself. I mean, people might not be familiar with the process, that it's okay to do that, that they should do that. And so one concern I have, I've had a change in job since I originally wrote it a few years ago, and at the time it went in Skim's charter. The IAB decided to close Skim before it was done. So it kind of didn't make a rechartering back then. So it's kind of sitting on the back burner. As the author, well, I will tell you that Greg Wilson from Oracle is still interested in it, and he wants to be on the draft. I couldn't get his confirmation before I could publish the current version. He is still interested, although I'm not sure he's going to be that active. My concern is to make sure there is actually enough interest that people would read the draft and implement it to prove it. And I'm not sure there is. I think people are saying I don't object, but I still would like to see more. And I'm not in a position anymore to say one way or another on behalf of anyone. So I sort of feel awkward about pushing something forward when I'm not sure anybody would actually implement it. I think Oracle has, and that's okay. It's a compatible extension, but I would like to see that people are using it. And I think the part of the issue is Skim is meant for provisioning. Oracle's one of the companies using Skim as a directory, and therefore needs multi-value filtering for things like user interfaces that coded in JavaScript or what have you. And so that's a useful feature for that. So if people are interested or not, I sort of leave it wide open. I remain sort of neutral and willing to take it forward since it's mostly done and straightforward. So that's all I'll say on that one.
Okay.
Should
Danny
we
is
talk
on the
about that first?
queue. Danny?
Yeah. Hi. So taking off my editor hat and putting on like my, Microsoft hat or whatever. I 100% think we need this feature, and I think there is the interest there, even just from that like provisioning aspect. Even if it hasn't been articulated very well or very vocally on the mailing list. I've had some side conversations with some of our partners, for instance, and I think the interest is there, and I'd be happy to try and get them to review and speak up as well.
Okay. So as chair, what I can do is I could do a call for adoption, but maybe it's a pre-call for adoption, Phil, right? To solicit feedback. Typically, there's the questions during call for adoption. If there's interest to adopt, interest to implement, interest to review, right? So we can put all of those questions together and see what the response
interest to be an author, which does mean actually helping.
Okay, so maybe instead of doing a call for adoption, is call for interest in the topic.
Yeah.
So interest. Sorry, I'm also trying to take notes because both you who agreed to be note takers are mainly speaking. Interest to author, interest to implement, interest to review. Yeah. Okay, so we can do that for this draft. Jeremy, I see you're in the queue.
So if I was interested in looking over the current version of this so that I could provide feedback or make an informed decision as to whether I thought it should go in the standard, where would I find that document?
So
go ahead, Phil.
So my understanding is twofold. This is proposed as an extension, so it's not necessarily going in 2.0, although maybe the group wants to do that. I think it's fine standing on its own because it could get published sooner. If you put it into the Skim-BIS work, I'll call it, that could delay it several years. So, and I was also thinking it's a fairly straightforward extension. What we'll need to do work on is re-review any security implications and privacy implications, and just general editorial cleanup. So 2 places for comments. One is, I would say, first of all, comment on the mailing list so that we can show some activity.
I think Nancy answered my question.
Yeah.
And this leads back to my confusion and question earlier is, are we tracking this stuff in this GitHub or are we tracking it somewhere else? And if we're tracking it in multiple places, can we have a pointer in those places to point to the other location?
I can try to clarify that. So the URLs on Data Tracker are meant to be the actual snapshots of the drafts as us as a group have decided to publish once it's an adopted draft. As an individual draft, it's up to the authors to do that. Those are the ones that are intended to be sent out to people to review. So that's the URL to say, like, go read this. This is the current state. Base your opinions and suggestions on this document. The mailing list is meant to be the official on the record place for that feedback. I would treat the GitHub more as the author's tool to manage the process by the authors themselves. So that is the way that I've done this in other groups is the authors, sometimes it's a private repo with just the authors and nobody else can even see the GitHub repo. Sometimes it's public, but really nobody else ever pays attention to it except the 2 or 3 authors. And then in some cases, the GitHub is more of a place for public feedback as well, just because it's so convenient. But think of the GitHub more as just it's the author's tool for working on the doc. But as soon as we want to go beyond the authors into the larger group, larger world, send out the data tracker URLs. Those are the better version snapshots of the more broad sweeping snapshots.
The addition I'll add to what Aaron said, Jeremy, is the GitHub is absolutely meant to be more for a tool for the authors and the guide. In some of the groups that I chair, we also use the GitHub as a way of tracking all of the issues. Aaron is correct that the mail list is the official channel for us to communicate. But as the number of issues that need to be addressed may grow, there's tools that can help simplify, and GitHub has become one, where the issues becomes the way for us to track, right, the things that we need to address on those particular documents. And particularly, again, coming back to the authors, right? The authors are ultimately responsible for ensuring that all of those issues get addressed. As chair in the other groups that I chair, I use those as a guide for readiness for publication, right?
Yeah, and to that point, one of the workflows that I've seen work pretty well is, let's say somebody who's only tangentially involved in this work, who's planning on implementing it in their product, but not really interested in participating in the authoring part, like side of that conversation. They may end up with a bunch of feedback that they want to provide, and the easiest way for them is over email. And they may just write up a long email with 5 or 6 points in it. And then as the authors, sometimes that feedback is very easy to just incorporate into the document with no real discussion needed. And other times it's going to be something that's going to take a long time to resolve, and you kind of just know that as the authors of the document. And in those cases, you can pull those into GitHub. You can just copy them, paste them into GitHub as individual issues. That way it's easier for you to keep track of, has this issue been resolved? Have we actually, are there any still outstanding? Does it need more discussion still? That kind of thing. So again, it's flexible in terms of how you want to actually do it, but I've seen that work pretty well.
So hopefully that helps, Jeremy, with the explanation of the process. Okay.
Yeah, I think your question of what do I send someone to get their feedback on, definitely send the datatracker.ietf.org URL.
But there isn't one of those for the current work that's being done on this schema.
That's correct.
Then we need to do that before.
Well, hold on. So we are still waiting for a document to get adopted. And as Danny is presented, right, we're still trying to work through as a group of what those issues are. Once there's a document, then you can point to the data tracker, right? But Jeremy, I would say the issues that you want to bring forward, you should definitely go through the official channel, which is the mail list. If you want to instill a dialogue, again, the official channel is the mail list. We also have the Slack channels available for the groups who have specific interests in the specific drafts. We created the Slack for that. But again, official channels are in the IETF data tracker and the mail list. For new work and for adopted work. And so currently, since we have only met officially twice as a working group, we're still ramping up to get, the core of the work adopted, the core being the use cases and the protocol and schema. I believe I was reviewing the charter as well. Phil, we also will need to map, and I think we can, the multi-value filtering to a use case to ensure that it's in scope for our charter, and similarly for the Skim events. Right.
I seem to recall we had it specifically named, but either way, it doesn't matter.
We did. I just have to dig up the notes. But I just wanted to make sure we call that out. Okay, we have 13 minutes left. So unless we need to continue on the process topic, Phil, I think the next, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the next one for discussion is the Skim events.
Right. Following up the last meeting, at the end of the last official meeting from Vienna, I guess,
yes,
there were questions raised, and a lot of these are covered in the discussion. There's a lot of, let me back up. In the events draft, there's a fair amount of non-normative stuff, and it's the section involving whether you transmit using the set security events token transmission method, or whether you use a backbone like Kafka. And the idea was to say, we don't need to worry about this because there are two methods. And the reason I went into two methods was I felt strongly that the use cases are very different. In one case, in the events draft, you're really going to domain, and there's a single stream between them. But within a domain, when you're doing things like replication and event coordination, you have many listeners and many publishers, and a bus organization for managing streams makes more sense, which is not something SET is capable of doing. So I wanted to call out and describe those two use cases. But I didn't really want to solve the problems in the spec. The idea is to define the events, and then you could go and use Kafka, which has all the conflict mitigation, backup, storage, and restoration. And then there are many other bus technologies as well. Plus, then there's SET if you want to go point to point, which does have a standard. I lost the battle. Somebody raised the question of, but we want one way to do everything. I fought that battle hard 4 years ago in the security event token group, and our Skim proposals were knocked out of the park by the IETF set group. And even then, the set working group ended up with 2 drafts for transmission, not 1. So that's a battle I think we should avoid getting into, solving things one way, because I think the use cases are substantially different. And we'll get into boundaries where people don't want others saying how they do replication and others. All we want to do is say it's possible and you can exchange these messages with this format, and that's standardized, and then people can choose to wire up their infrastructure how they choose. I think what's most important for interop is the point-to-point or domain-to-domain. And I think those are things we should talk through as use cases. And we can do that prior to adoption. we should have a lot of discussion of that prior to adoption. But either way, I kind of expect we will either be deciding to go down that road and have a lot of normative text, or we'll have the correct text explaining why it's excluded, but giving people the advisory advice they need when setting that up, which was my goal originally. So there's a lot of water under the bridge that this spec is covering by referencing those other specs. So this is a good one where people want to get into it. There's a fair amount of meat, and if you send messages on the email, I'll try to point you to places to read or to focus your attention. And also, if you want to co-author and really dig into it, I would love the help. And especially if you're a person that's in a position to travel, I'm going to have a problem being able to travel and attend meetings, and I really think it would be nice to have a co-author that is able to attend. So that's something I'm worried about. And Danny, you brought up the async event and whether it should be pulled out so it can be its own thing. I'd be interested to see what you think the relationship is between the clients that invoke an asynchronous operation and how the notification comes back. Does it come back to the same client? Ignore the mechanics for now, but if I'm a client and I make a request, is it only me that gets the response, or is it a central service that gets the response in your case? That was something we started talking about on the list, and we should keep talking about that because it's a good point that maybe it should be a separate thing, or maybe it just fits in there. I don't know, but I'll leave that to you, Danny, to push your requirements one way or the other.
Annie, you're in the queue.
Yeah, like I think the way that your draft has defined asynchronous requests and how to then communicate the eventual outcome back with set makes sense. And I'm trying to like color this through the glasses that I with almost anything set related have almost no idea what I'm looking at. But I guess the sort of like the requirement that I was trying to think around was more of I guess it would be a single party getting their like a response back later. It's think of like the existing sort of client server or client service provider relationship in Skim, and how that could be accommodated, or how that could accommodate async requests without requiring a build out of set if there was no other need for them to use set, or if they didn't want to. And in my mind, that probably comes down to you make a request as a client, the server responds back to the 202, and then we define a very basic schema or whatever for a response that includes some sort of transaction ID that can then be redeemed against a defined endpoint later. So it's not that. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. I was thinking of, I was trying to describe it in terms of a use case. And what I was thinking was you might have a UI that is setting up a new account for somebody. And so at some point you make the Skim request, and some services do it instantly. Some services will take a few minutes. And what you want to be able to do is, while you're taking the user through the workflow, you want to get that notice back so you can let the workflow advance in the UI. And that there means that an individual client that's doing a very specific operation is just getting a response back to coordinate a UI. So that's one use case. Another use case might be, I have a provisioning system that's sending a whole stream of transactions, and it just wants to speed up performance and then reconcile the results. So those could have very different design requirements.
Yeah, and I think that second use case that you just described is probably the one that I was more thinking towards.
Yeah, and that's where I was, and that's why I was thinking that you would tend to have a central receiver that says, okay, those 5 transactions have been ticked off, rather than making sure that the same client that made the request is the one that gets the result.
Yeah. I think there's enough here to, we can discuss it off of, the mail group or whichever, rather than here.
I would say one thing for everybody to note, that a lot of cases we have to think about whether things are a point-to-point relationship between a client and a server, or whether we're talking about things in the context of multiple clients, multiple receivers, multiple nodes, and all these kinds of things. So that's in part why some of these issues aren't so easy, because it's not just a simple protocol anymore. We're now talking about streams of events and who are the receivers and who are the senders.
I think that's good advice. Okay, with 3 minutes left, I can pose a similar question, Phil, to what we'll do with the multi-value filtering, if that will help you get direction. I think you had one response on the mail list from Danny that there is interest for the Skim events, but we're going to need more.
Thanks, Danny.
Is that fair?
That's fair.
So call for interest. Okay, great. Any other business? I think at this point, given the challenges in trying to schedule things, and I know for me personally, July is completely booked. Between RSA, Identiverse, and a couple other forums, I will not be available. So that puts us to our next session being the IETF-114 in Philadelphia. There's nothing, as I mentioned earlier, there's nothing precluding the participants in doing their own individual group huddles. So unless I hear objections, I think our next meeting, formal meeting, will be in the IETF-114. I'm getting silence, so I'm going to take that as no objections. Phil?
No objections.
Okay. Yeah, it's just interesting. It popped up, but I just realized it was just your mic turned on. Okay, so with that, Aaron, unless you have any other closing arguments or not arguments, sorry.
Arguments.
Yeah. Sorry, I was talking to legal earlier today.
No, just feel free to get in touch with me in Slack if you have any questions about using GitHub or what docs should be named or anything like that. I'm happy to respond there.
I think we're both on the Slack channels too, so feel free to do that. Let's see, anything else? Going once, going twice. I think I can give you a whole minute back. Thank you, everyone. And until IETF-114.
Thanks.
Bye.